is going to be awful, this entire episode, because we're drinking canned wine, and it's extremely carbonated, and I'm just burping like crazy. I am so sorry, you guys.
This podcast is just going to be the tale of your digestive issues.
I have a lot of them. I'm sorry. Just start a second podcast about gut health. God.
Gut health with Olivia.
Getting gutsy. Nope, that's terrible. Trust your gut. A probiotic podcast.
Gut life.
No.
Gut life? Gut life.
Oh, I get what you mean. Gut milk. That's awful.
Gut milk?
That just sounds gross.
Tasty.
Ew.
Gut milk.
Ew.
That sounds awful.
Oh, milk is bad in general. For me, at least, for my gut. I'm lactose intolerant. Newly, sadly, lactose intolerant, which is a bummer.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, this is Jump Scare, the podcast.
Ooh, Jump Scare, the podcast. Wow, we took a long time to say the name of this podcast.
We did, and that was the first time I said it first, and you had to go and repeat it. That's what I think they call heap-eating.
Heap-eating?
Yeah, which sounds terrible when said out loud. I've seen it written a lot, and it's fine, but saying it out loud just sounds terrible.
Never even heard it written.
It's
I've never even heard it written.
Wow, okay. It's a term for when women say something and then men repeat it and get all the credit for it. I'm not saying that's what that was. It would have been much funnier if you understood the reference right away.
Here, we'll just redo it.
It's Jump Scare, the podcast.
Jump Scare, the podcast.
Had to go and heat me. Because I had to stop saying that word. It sounds so dumb.
It sounds really weird.
It's really, okay, we're not saying that again. I'm Olivia Cordell.
Oh, yeah, I'm Casey Dunn.
And this is a podcast where we talk about scary horror things.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say movies, but again, it could be other things.
Horror concepts.
Yeah.
I feel like I keep saying that, and I think that just sounds kind of right.
Yeah, we do horror concepts, and then we talk about them. We make them into slightly more realized concepts than they start out. We do this every week.
We do.
We do.
We've been here for 4 weeks. This is our 4th week?
Our 4th week of episodes?
Yeah.
No, okay. You don't want to reveal our secrets?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Wait, 1 second.
Oh, we're doing some more sound effects?
Yeah, you're now behind the curtain. Welcome into the making of Jump Scare, the podcast.
We record 2 episodes on one night, which will work out if we... I'm sorry, I burped. I did it again. Which will work out when we start releasing these twice a week, or whatever, we might start releasing these twice a week. Mm-hmm. Maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll just release 1 episode a week. Maybe it'll be 1 long episode. Maybe it'll be 1 short episode. Maybe it'll be no episodes and you guys will hate us.
Yeah. We're just never going to release.
So technically, this is our 4th episode, but we've only been recording
for
2 weeks. This is our 2nd week. And since our first week, we both tried to put in a lot more effort for this week somehow. We both went home and did research and came back with notes.
Yeah. Yeah, you heard mine last week.
Or maybe this week.
Yeah, we don't know.
We have no plan.
But maybe you'll let us know. You know what? You tweet us what we did, huh?
You tell us, because we won't be paying attention
we
at this
got
point.
no clue.
So since last week, we have each come up with a concept. We just recorded Casey's very recently, and now we're about to do mine. But for you guys, who knows? Maybe a week passed. Maybe you're listening to this 2 days later. This is a fun experiment with time, with linear time.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So I mentioned this last episode, last week, last day, that I was really excited to be doing the first period piece. And then Casey did a period piece before I did. I'm really annoyed about it because I was really excited for this to be a period piece. I was like, yeah, I'm going to have so many facts about history that I can build this world and it's going to be so great. And now I don't get that gold star anymore.
You definitely don't. But I believe in you. And I think that you can be the first time that a sequel has been better than the original since Shrek 2.
What? I'm not writing the sequel to your film.
No. I'm just saying you're the sequel in doing a horror concept podcast where it's a historical piece.
What are you saying?
All right. Just do your concept.
Okay. Hold on. Let me drink some more of this very bubbly wine. Okay, so I came up with this idea almost immediately after leaving the recording booth last week. I think I was driving home, after leaving here, recording in Soundbox Studio City. Recording with Soundbox Studio City.
We haven't advertised in like 2 episodes.
No, we need to.
Soundbox Studio City.
That's where we're recording right now. So driving home, I think, from here, I came up with this idea because I have been thinking a lot about... This is so dumb. But I've been thinking a lot about how Get Out is great. Get Out's just so good. And I really want what Get Out did for the Black community and for, culture as a whole, for our society as a whole. And I want that for Asian Americans so badly. You guys can't see me, which I keep forgetting about.
Yeah.
I am Korean American. Some people don't know that, though, from looking at me because I'm mixed. Yeah. Jeremy didn't know that. Someone you don't know.
Yeah.
Someone we both know.
But we both know Jeremy. He
found out like 2 weeks ago. He was like, wait, what? You're Asian? I'm like, it's not hard to tell.
It's not.
Right?
It's not.
And then I have some people who are like, wait, you're mixed? I thought you were full Asian.
I think...
What?
Are most of these people white people?
Yes, everyone is white.
They're crazy.
Everyone who doesn't know, and then Asians will look at me and be like, oh, you're mixed. Is your mom white? I'll be like, yes, how did you know? And they know.
Huh. That is interesting, and I don't necessarily have any thoughts on that because I've never been in that situation where anybody has been like, oh, you're anything other than white.
Because you're the whitest kid I know.
Thank you. But I am very white, yes. And so I think that's like just pretty apparent. But I do think there is like a weird thing within white culture, which is like, okay, how do I not screw up this interaction? like it's like, all right, I'm about to talk to somebody and I'm just going to make an assumption about their race so that I hope I get it right.
I mean, that is very white of you.
Yeah.
So anyway, with that in mind, or not, actually erase everything I said about Get Out from your mind.
Okay, I will erase everything about Get Out from my mind.
Not everything about it, but everything I just said about wanting that. Anyway, because it'll spoil my ideas.
Oh, okay.
So just mentally, whoosh. Okay, so I'm going to read a lot of this from a note because I took a lot of notes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I'm showing the notes right now.
Olivia is scrolling on her notes app, and it actually takes 5 seconds to scroll the whole thing, which I think is telling of how long that notes is. And
now that we're on a time constraint,
well,
we've got about half an hour. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The year is 1941. World War II is alive and kicking. Well, that sounds stupid. World War II is happening in Europe right now, but America is not involved. It's like pretty bad in Europe, especially because they're not that far out of World War I, and they thought that World War I was going to be it, and it killed off like a third of the male population of Europe, and now they're back in another war, like 30 years later, less than 30 years later. So World War II is like ravaging Europe and has started to branch out into other parts of the world. It's starting to actually become a world war instead of just a European war. But America is still not involved, which everyone else is kind of mad about because America could like totally just go in there, end the war, be great, everything's over. But America doesn't want to get involved because of World War I. But then on December 7th, 1941, just before 8 a.m., hundreds of Japanese fighter planes descend on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, where they managed to destroy or damage nearly 20 American naval vessels and over 300 airplanes. That's a lot. So there were...
Yeah.
First of all, I'm amazed that there were 20 naval vessels and over 300 airplanes in this naval base in the first place, and that they were able to destroy all those. And that's insane. More importantly, more than 2,400 people died, which is a really big number. And I don't know why I didn't realize it was that many people.
No, that's pretty staggering.
Right?
I would have guessed in the hundreds.
Right? And so all of this is coming from a mixture of Wikipedia and history.com. So if these numbers are incorrect, take it up with one of them or take it up with @jumpscare0036 on Twitter.
Yeah, all three of those will give you great reactions.
Yes. But 2,400 people, that's a lot. A lot of American citizens. And that number, I think, was only American citizens. Or American civilians. That didn't count all of the Japanese kamikaze pilots and everything who also died. So a lot of people die, just like an insane amount of people die. The day after the assault, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, asks Congress to declare war on Japan. I also didn't realize at this time that FDR was still in office.
Really?
I mean, he was president during 1941.
Yeah.
And he also was president during the Great Depression in 1933. But he also was in office for how many terms? 4?
Yeah, he died in his fourth
term, so that's like 16 years. That is a long time.
Yeah, he made it a little over 12, I think. Maybe into his 13th year.
Damn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, because he does the December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Well, yes, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, crazy though.
Yeah.
How long?
Whenever I think of FDR, I think of Annie and the Great Depression. Specifically Annie.
Yeah.
And singing Tomorrow in his office. But this is almost 10 years later after Annie. And he's still president. Anyway, fast forward to February 19th, 1942. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, authorizes Executive Order 9066, which allows regional military commanders to designate, quote, military areas anywhere in the U.S. from which, quote, any or all persons may be excluded. So this is a very wordy way of saying that it allowed the military and military leaders, like the president, who was a military leader, to declare that the entire West Coast was a military area. The entire West Coast. And anyone of Japanese ancestry was excluded from that area. So just think about that. Something that sounds as kind of innocuous as allowing military commanders to designate military areas, and in those military areas, anybody may be excluded. It's kind of like, oh, this allows you to set up military bases where civilians aren't allowed in. Makes sense? Fine, for a small plot of land in like Coronado Island in San Diego. But this allowed the military areas to be any size, including the entire west coast of the United States of America.
Wow.
Which is 3 states, Washington, Oregon, and California. And California is, the 3rd largest state in America size-wise and population-wise. It's huge. The West Coast is huge. So the entire West Coast was a military area, and anyone up to 1/16th Japanese ancestry was excluded from that area. No longer allowed to be there. And this included American citizens. It didn't matter if you're an American citizen born here or not. It even included, Japanese or children of Japanese heritage who were orphans and don't even know 100% what their heritage was. Doesn't matter. All of them were excluded from the West Coast, where, by the way, at this time, the majority of Asian American citizens lived, or Asian American, citizens or immigrants or resident aliens or whatever lived, because it's closest to Asia, because of the Pacific Ocean and everything. Geography, in case you didn't know.
I don't know. Geography, I'm terrible at.
They don't teach geography in American schools, so of course we're going to be terrible at it. But, so this was signed on February 19th. But before that, between December 7th and February 19th, 5,000 Japanese Americans had already been relocated. Already. There was no official law. There was nothing that said that they were allowed to do this. They just said, no, you can't be here.
Right.
In addition to the 5,500, so 5,500 community leaders that had been arrested immediately after the Pearl Harbor attack, and thus were already in custody. So that is over 10,000 Japanese Americans who had already been taken into custody and relocated before there was ever even a law that allowed this to happen. So that's pretty upsetting. And that's very, reminiscent of where we are right now with immigrants at the border who may not even be immigrants. A lot of them are refugees seeking asylum who are legally allowed to be here, being displaced, put into camps, separated from their families, without there being any laws that allow that. And in fact, there being laws that don't allow it, that shouldn't allow it, that should prohibit it, and it's still happening.
Mm-hmm.
So, goes to show you that, how many years, over 60 years later, this is still happening. Anyway, so 10,000 are relocated, and then FDR is like, I don't want to get in trouble, so let's make it a law that allows this to happen. Let's make this okay.
Right.
Which is like creating a rule for a game after you've already cheated at said game, which is just...
Oh, man. It's America's best trick.
Honestly, America does it a lot, which is really upsetting. Ultimately, eventually, by the time that this relocation period is underway, which is throughout the spring of 1942, nearly 120,000 Japanese Americans living in the U.S. mainland were forcibly relocated that spring alone. So just during 4 or 5 months, 120,000 Japanese Americans are relocated from their homes. Just a couple background notes on it so that you kind of know what this was like, and I'm sure a lot of people know because this was a big deal. But there's a surprising number of people who don't know, including my mother. I took her to see Allegiance, which is a Broadway play / musical, I think. It starred Lea Salonga and George Takei and was amazing and was about Japanese internment. And my mom afterward cried so much and said, I never knew this happened. And I was like, Mom, this happened about a decade before she was born. Mm-hmm. So not even that long before. Never learned about it. Never heard about it. Nothing.
Yeah, it's strikingly uncovered in American history classes. Mm-hmm. It's sort of just skipped over. That whole time period and FDR's legacy that's just part of it that's swept under the rug or not. It's
also, the term internment is a kind of a misnomer, which I'll get into later. But it's also, it doesn't sound as bad as other things that were going on. In Europe, you had concentration camps, and here you had internment camps, it sounds better, obviously. Yeah. And so people are able to dismiss it more easily because of that. Mm-hmm. Instead of actually dealing with what happened. So here's what happened. After FDR signed this notice and made all of the West Coast a military zone, people had 6 days of notice to dispose of their belongings, anything they had, other than what they could carry. So they could only bring with them the things that they could carry. Anything else had to be left behind. I read this about how they were forced to wear all of their nicest clothes so that they could keep their clothes because they had to they basically could only leave with the clothes on their back. And so all the photos taken made all Americans, or white Americans, think that they were dressing up to go to camps. Also made them think that they were all very wealthy. And this wasn't really affecting them because look at how nicely they were dressed. They must be fine,
Wow.
Yeah. So that's upsetting. So where did they... Oh, sorry. Also, I said this before, but anyone who was at least 1/16 Japanese was evacuated. So that's really... There was an interesting quote that I found that likened it at the time to the one-drop rule when it came to African-American slaves back in the, 17th, 16th, 18th, 19th centuries. I always get confused when it comes to centuries and the hundreds because they're different.
It's so dumb.
Yes. Anyway, so it's very similar. One drop Japanese blood and you were nixed.
A 16th, that's still 4 generations?
I'm a half. My children will be, if we don't, procreate with Asians, it's a terrible thing to say. It sounded so dumb. I didn't want to say, I don't know. If I was a half, my children would be a 4th.
Yeah.
Their children would be an 8th. Their children would be a 16th. So that is 5 generations? Because a 16th, an 8th, a 4th, a half, and then a full.
Yeah.
So 5 generations worth.
Yeah, so you set that as the standard because you can just group everybody into that.
Yes.
Also because at a 16th, how other than just somebody saying it can you prove one way or the other?
Yeah, it's a name at that point. Your last name just happens to sound Asian or whatever. You can't, So 1/16th, including children, elderly, and handicapped people. And that becomes a big deal later because there wasn't proper medical care in the camps that they were relocated to. And so a lot of elderly and handicapped people or chronically ill people died. A lot of people died because of just improper care, basically. Improper. So where did they go? So first they went to assembly centers where they stayed for about 6 months before getting relocated to a count. But the assembly centers were usually stables or livestock pavilions, including the Santa Anita racetrack, which is right over here, which is one of the most famous ones. Because now it's where rich people go and bet on horses and things like that. I know a lot of sorority girls who go there for invites and things, and it's very posh and you wear your hats and you watch horses race and things like that, and they have fun events.
That is telling.
Yes. But at the Santa Anita racetrack, over 8,500 people were forced to live in stables because over 18,000 there were there in total. 18,000 people lived in this one racetrack, which is kind of like a football field plus a building and some stables. And they lived in tents and barracks and wherever they could find space, basically, and in stables, which is terrible. I mean, those are not made for humans at all.
No.
Literally
made for animals. Like, what the...
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah, so not great. Already lots of horror in this story, and it's not even the horror movie part yet.
Yeah, and it's that... I love it because it is that, like, oh God, this is so uncomfortable. Like, what the hell, guys? And it is a really great, like, starting point for any horror, which is, like, just the idea or the thought around it is uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's just unconscionable for so many people and a disturbing idea when you actually get into what happened.
Yep.
After 6 months, they were moved to relocation centers, which are what we call internment camps, where armed guards were posted. They were all in a remote, kind of desolate area far from anywhere else. So if you escaped, there was nowhere to go, but but very few tried to escape. Throughout many camps, 25 people were forced to live in spaces meant to contain 4 people. So I don't even want to do the math there. There were plenty of documented instances of guards shooting internees, people who were interned, who tried to, if they attempted to walk outside the fences at all. So it's like, you tried to leave, you were shot and killed. There were recorded 1,862 deaths across the 10 camps, but these are the only ones that were recorded. So we don't know if there were more.
Yeah.
And they're kind of vague they say like it's mostly health and things.
Right.
So we're not going to focus on the camps themselves, the relocation camps. We're going to focus on the assembly centers, because this is an interesting liminal space, and in between two places. This is before, because they lived in the relocation centers for years. The assembly center, where they were moved to, was a ton of people in a very small area and no infrastructure, really. There wasn't really any infrastructure for healthcare, for education, for family needs, for anything. That's why I think there's a lot of opportunity there to create something, to create a world within that. So I read this quote that I thought was really interesting, and this is where I kind of want to start from.
Okay.
A man who was interned as a child, his name was Okazaki, was his last name. He is quoted in, I believe, a Time article. It was either Time or Life. I think it was Time. Saying that he objects to the term internment and prefers the term incarceration or imprisonment. Quote, "I was not an internee because I am a citizen. The definition of it's a woman, there's a she. The definition of internment refers to enemy aliens in a time of war." So internment technically means anyone who is not an American citizen during a time of war with their people, basically.
Right.
But almost everyone who was interned was an American citizen. So the idea that they were interned is already automatically othering them as an alien, as something else, as something that isn't American, isn't one of us. Even though many of them were born in America, completely acculturated, all of that. So I like that idea because a lot of times horror movies deal with the idea of the other, a fear of something that you don't understand, of something that's different, of aliens or monsters or something. And the fact that she even used the term enemy aliens, I thought of, and this is not an alien movie, but
that point,
yeah.
that othering, that something to fear.
Yes, there's something to fear. And then the horror of being told that you are something to fear when you know you're not. Of people being scared of you when there's nothing wrong with you, when nothing's happened. So that's where I started with this.
Okay.
So I'm setting the stage with that.
Yeah, we are in it now.
We're here. This is what happened.
Okay.
So I want you to think of, and I keep seeing this image in my head, of a group of teenage boys, probably adolescent boys, all Japanese American, in this assembly center where it's, they're living in tents on dirt or in stables, and they're still just trying to find ways to pass the time in Santa Anita. So, it's bright blue skies and sunshiny all the time, and they're wearing their 40s baseball uniforms because they're probably on the baseball team together and like the community baseball team, and they love their hats and everything, and so they're playing like baseball out in the field, and something starts happening. There's a skirmish that breaks out, and so they all have to stop playing and all turn around, and it's almost M. Night Shyamalan when M. Night Shyamalan was good, you know?
So the first 30 minutes of nearly every film?
Well, I mean, okay. The Village was pretty okay. Sixth Sense, obviously. Signs.
Yeah.
But his use of silence and the angles from below with the wind blowing through your hair, it's a little unsettling, but it's all... You know what I'm getting at?
Right, well, like, everything's... If you were to take away the way it's shot, it would be totally normal or peaceful.
Exactly.
But because of the way you're literally the camera is placing you, then it's like, oh no, there's something wrong, or the way it's cut, and so like, you're having these. Yeah, I totally know what you mean.
The cinematography is important to that, and the atmosphere it creates. So yes, I'd want it to center around probably this one teenage boy and some of his friends. But also, God, there's those burps again. But also his family, because all of his family is there. Probably multiple generations. A grandmother, his parents, his younger sister. They're all forced to live in these very tight quarters, and there's no privacy, and that's terrible for a teenager especially. And there's probably a certain amount of angst in the beginning, and this anger and self-doubt that I read a lot of children felt that were interned because they're too young to be angry at the outside world for doing this to them. They just believe that something's wrong with themselves. And this internalized insecurity and belief that something is wrong with them to make other people do this to them, that they're being punished when that they've done wrong, even though they haven't done anything wrong.
Right.
So dealing with that. I also like the idea of the baseballs because baseball bats playing a part in it. And like later scenes at the end would probably be like some showdowns and fighting instead. And
yeah.
Get
it's
some
a great
Steve
weapon.
Harrington with a baseball bat with nails through it kind of thing. But in the 40s, it's great.
Absolutely. I'm totally here for that.
I also just love the period costumes and imagery and everything of Asian American people, because generally when you see things from that time period, it's all white people. And sometimes it's about the civil rights movement, and so you get Black people or African American people, but Asians are very largely erased from a lot of American history before recently.
Absolutely.
And so I would love to see that. So this is kind of where I started with the scary horror movie concept part. So people at the assembly center are disappearing, and then they return, but they're changed. They're different. They're not zombies or anything like that, but they are different when they come back. And some of them are almost like too peaceful, too serene, too okay with what's happening to them. And other ones seem that way, and then there are violent outbursts. They're driven to do something terrible, and fights break out, which justifies the guards using brute force to keep the peace.
Right.
And justifies the guards lumping them together as, you know, you're the enemy, you're animals, you're other. But there are some that come back who are just empty almost, which also justifies the guards and white people, the oppressors in general, saying, well, they're the good ones, you know, be more like them, the model minority. That idea that's so often thrust upon Asian Americans here. Some other ideas, like there's obviously going to be a couple really mean guards, and one is in charge who's almost Nazi-esque, but he's American, and they use too much force, and they don't give enough rations. They don't take people seriously when there's problems. And there's probably a really nice doctor who's trying his best to help them as much as he can. And then, of course, later it turns out the doctor is the one that's changing people. And you thought you could trust him because he seemed better than the rest, but he wasn't.
Yeah, that's good.
And so then I have this list here of scary concepts that I thought of while brainstorming this, which is families in close proximity, oppression, the fear of the other, inherited trauma, baseball, the white guy that you think is good but isn't, and Get Out but for Asians was the last thing I wrote.
Get Out but for Asians.
So that's where I came from with this. That's where I started, and what I've been thinking about all week, which is why I had a huge freaking note of ideas.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's like you've got the concept, but almost overwhelmed by the possibilities
There's so
from
many.
that concept.
Yeah, because I spent so much time immersing myself in the world of the concept and learning about the setting and learning about all the horrible things that happen to people. And there's so many opportunities there. So I don't know what to do.
So one thing that from listening to you, seemed to stand out was the fear of the pain and the beauty being erased.
Interesting. What do you mean?
Like that fear from a minority of, and it can be a minority anywhere, but specifically from the 1940s, Asian Americans, their entire existence being erased from that time period. And this feeling like the only way that they're seen is when the majority wants them to be seen. And so maybe focusing on that a little bit, where it's like, yeah, they're being pulled away, and when they come back, they are supposed to be the ideal. And if they break away from that, then they are killed or excommunicated even further. And that it's this feeling of oppression and the power structure caving in on them and forcing them into a mold.
That's definitely something I was trying to get at there, was this, what happens to a lot of oppressed groups. Like, have you seen Ma Rainey's Black Bottom?
No.
Okay, it's a play, and it's about a group of black musicians, and I saw a really great staging of it in London, where there was a recording area, the booth was up above the stage, and the locker room was below the stage, and all of the fighting and attacking, and eventually a murder happens below the stage, and it's all, what they would call in the news, black-on-black violence. But it's, the members of the band fighting with each other. But the whole time at this staging at the National Theatre in London, the whole time, the white producers are up in the booth at the top with the light on, just working. But the whole time you're constantly reminded that the ones down at the bottom are only where they are because of the people up above.
Yeah.
And they're only being driven to what they're doing because of the people up above. And so no matter how much you might want to be like, oh, well, that's just because they're like that. Like, they're like, people like that are always going to be violent towards each other. Like, no. It's because they've been forced into that position. And the thing that I think a lot of Asian Americans deal with is, and it's a long-standing cultural notion, that if you just try hard enough, to be white enough, to be American enough, to pursue the American dream enough, if you speak English well enough, if you have an American name and you try hard enough, then you'll be accepted. Then everything will be fine. And that's partly why I think internment itself has been swept under the rug so much, because Asian Americans have been led to believe that if we just ignore the things that have been done to us and pretend like everything's fine, then it can't happen again because we'll have done what they wanted us to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that is the thing I wanted to get at there, was that they're coming back different and they're coming back idealized because they've been made into that, and it still doesn't work.
Yeah.
They're still in this horrible situation and being punished for something that they haven't done wrong and everything.
Yeah, and I think there can be some really hauntingly amazing moments with that. Like the mother or somebody undergoing whatever is happening to them as a way of being like, no, okay, I will do it so that I can be a proper model for my children so that we can just survive this.
Yeah.
And there being a moment where the son, the main protagonist, is like breaking outside of those bounds, and she's just like, and you start to see that breaking of like this inner turmoil for her, because she has changed, but like I guess like her original self or her true self trying to break out of whatever has been done to her, but like just trying to even have that communication with her son of like, you need to be okay with this to survive.
Well, yeah, I wanted it to start out from an expositional standpoint of the, dinner table or whatever is as close to that as possible as they can get there. And that they're going to try to create a home in whatever horse stable or barracks they get put in. And so them trying to have a normal dinner, and it's mom and it's dad and it's grandma and it's the little sister, and the little sister says something about how she hates being Japanese because like she hates being like this, and they're trying to tell her like, no, it's okay to be both, but like just if this is something we'll have to get through, and blah blah blah. And the brother at some point, the protagonist, is the one saying like, they can't treat us like this is bullshit, like blah blah blah. And the parents being like, no, you need to just stay in line, don't do anything to get yourself hurt, don't do anything to get your sister hurt, like that kind of a thing. And so ultimately what I see, whatever plot-wise ends up happening, is the baseball team, like the main character and his friends, kind of leading almost a riot or trying to fight back against whoever is doing this to them. And of course, at first they go to the main guards who have been bullying them the whole time, only to find out that they are not behind whatever's happening to everyone. And it's the doctor person who they thought was their friend the whole time. And they go back and they probably beat him up or something. They do something. And then the next day they're rounded up and they think like something bad's like we're going to get in trouble, something bad's going to happen. But instead what's happening is they're all being loaded onto trains to be taken to the relocation centers. And that's why I really wanted to do the assembly centers, because at the end it's like they almost have this moment of hope, like, oh, we're going somewhere else where this isn't going to happen anymore, and it's going to be better there. We're going to have a home there. Like, they're going to give us work, and it's going to be better. But it's not. And anyone who knows what happened knows that that's not the truth.
Yeah, there is that haunting from the start where it's like, this isn't going to get better. Mm-mm. This isn't a film that ends better.
Yeah.
And I do so that's interesting. Are they happy that the riot happens? Is the majority happy? Is it another thing of like, great, we can say, yeah, they rioted. Of course they did, because that is Asian Americans, or that's like Asian people, like that. We're using it more as another piece of the narrative.
Well, that's the thing, is that, Asian Americans aren't known for rioting. They aren't known for fighting back ever. Mm-mm. And I want to see that from a few of them, because I want that validation of like, yes, we can like fight back when wrong has been done to you. I want to see us stand up for ourselves sometimes. Mm-hmm. But also with the understanding that probably most of the community isn't going to approve. And the main character is probably going to go out home after that partially covered in blood and going to be reprimanded. But then like he'll be reprimanded by like his father, and then his mother comes in and is like, you did the right thing. Because the person that I see being operated on is the grandmother. Because I feel like that would be a lot more upsetting.
It absolutely would.
And I can see it happening early on. Like, grandma disappears, and at first everyone's panicking. Like, where is she? What's going on? The old, the infirm, the handicapped are the ones that are disappearing. Mm-hmm. And then they show up again. And it's like, oh, they're fine. But something's wrong, and they're not there anymore, and they're changed. Almost like they're being lobotomized,
Yeah. I kind of figured it was some form of
something
lobotomy.
Like that, yeah. But that's where I floundered the most in coming up with this, is the actual
scary thing, or like what's happening.
Yeah. The fear.
Yeah.
The fear factor.
Well, I mean, a lobotomy is literally erasing a portion of a person.
Yeah.
It is the destroying of what makes a person,
Yeah.
taking away their agency or identity. And so I think that's good. I think that there needs to be a moment where you see the practice being done or almost being done, probably to one of the boys.
Yeah.
Is like, yeah, basically like one of them is about to be operated on, and maybe they get saved at the last moment. Mm-hmm. But actually getting that really, because it's just, a lobotomy is so scary.
Yeah, it's so scary. It's so gross.
It's just terrifying.
Goes through your eye. I hate it. And they just
so
like scramble up your brain.
It's
it could be that it's anyone who dissents early on are the ones that are taken away.
And it makes sense for a grandma.
Yeah, to be the one that's like, she's shouting at them in Japanese or something, or throws an egg. Mm-hmm. Like, she does something that's, subversive, but in a grandma way. Yeah. And then she vanishes. And maybe it happens first with, like, the big angry guy who always gets drunk and, is fighting with the guards all the time. And he's the first one to come back changed. Yeah. And then other people start coming back changed, like, for little things of dissent.
Absolutely.
And so it could be that, like, the main character or some of his friends or even his younger sister did something near the end, near the climax, does something that gets them detained.
Oh, man, yeah. And so they get detained, and that's why the riot happens. Yeah. Is they're like, no, we've been betrayed by this guy. We know that we got betrayed. We can't let this other person get hurt.
Yeah, definitely. It's got to be something like that, because it's got to be a community act. Mm-hmm. That brings people together, but also is super dangerous. But there has to be, a rallying point for it.
There absolutely is.
Yeah. Anyway, I know we're like way over time. It's 9:20. But I would love to talk about this more, because I really feel passionately about it. But
well, maybe we do a part 2.
Yeah, we'll do a little bit of a recap next week, and then we'll go on from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
let's both think about it a little bit.
Yeah, and we can maybe come to flesh it out, or find like a specific thing that we really want to delve into with it. I They
That'd
could be
great.
like, we're gonna bring this thing back, because I would love to keep talking about it
I
too.
would too. I have a lot of feelings about it, obviously. That's why I'm like passionately sweating right now.
Well, let's get out of this booth so we can cool down a little bit.
Yes, please.
It's very hot in here.
It's very hot. And we'll come back to this one later, I hope.
Yeah.
Because it makes me really excited. Okay.
We're back.
We're back. This is the addendum, the little tacked on to the end, the amendment, the PS, I don't know, what other things go at the end of things?
This is the
Epilogue. Yeah, that. We were talking about my Japanese internment camp idea, or assembly center pre-internment camp idea.
Yeah.
And basically, I spent the entire episode just setting it up with historical background and some ideas, and didn't get a chance to get any feedback or development from Casey. And so I actually haven't really done a lot of thinking about it in the 5 days since then, because I'm just interested in hearing your thoughts, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Cool.
So just to throw you in the spotlight right now, put you on the spot, what do you think about this idea that I pitched to you 5 days ago and we haven't talked about since, with absolutely no recap?
Right.
At 11 at night.
So with my expert opinion, and I do believe it's an expert opinion, I think the thing we were trying to pinpoint or figure out was some of the just some of the structuring of it, from getting us from the beginning to the ending.
Yeah, some of the
this.
actual beats, because there's concept there, but there aren't story plot points.
And the moment that still resonates with me is the reveal of the doctor being a villain, and just how creepy and perfectly like time period that can really be, because doctor offices and also just surgical laboratories are...
Oh, you're British now. The surgical laboratories.
Oh, yes. Well, the surgical laboratory was first birthed...
surgical laboratory is.
Oh, it can be it can be anything.
Okay. An operating theater?
Yes. So that's creepy all of the time, because it's scary to think about one's own mortality and those types of things.
Oh, yeah.
So I really love that sequence. And I think that there is such great stuff that can be really put in there and brought out of that, with it being like, I keep coming back to the idea of a kid being brought in for the brain doodah, for the lobotomy.
It's a lobotomy, or it could be electroshock. It could be any number of mind altering procedures.
But being brought in for that and seeing that all sort of go on, and I think lobotomy is so good as a horror idea, so because it is going through the eye, and the whole surgery, it's sort of brings about that uncanny valley type resonance and everything. And so I just, the doctor slowly like bringing them in, and you have operatic music or whatever type of just like this undergrowth of this like this seedy side being shown through, which is sort of what's been hinted at the whole time. And so you're finally, as the audience, being brought through to everything. And I think one of the decisions to make is whether, when like the first time that is this the first time that you would see the lobotomy procedure, or whatever the procedure is happening?
Probably, I'm guessing so. And I don't even know if it actually is executed all the way, because ideally we'd follow the same protagonist mostly the whole time, but I don't want him to actually be, operated upon.
And so, that was my question, is what happens when the person is being brought to that moment?
Well, I'm guessing that what happens so far up to this point is that people who cause disturbances disappear and either reappear or don't, depending on whether the procedure works, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe at some point the main character and his friends have disobeyed some rules or caused some disruptions or something, and have gotten in trouble with the guards, and maybe the guards have shot at them or beat them up, because that was totally normal in these camps and assembly centers. So maybe the main character was taken into custody by the guards, and he thinks that whatever happened to them happened to others, it's going to happen to him, and he's been beaten up, and maybe he's concussed and going in and out of consciousness, and the doctor shows up, and so up until this point, the doctor has been their friend, has been vouching for them, has been trying to help them, and the doctor's like, don't worry, I'm gonna take care of this, I'm gonna get you out of here. The doctor, he like sees the doctor negotiating with the guards, being like, no, let me take care of him, he obviously needs medical help, let me deal with him, I promise everything will be fine. And so the kid thinks that he's being rescued by the doctor, and instead the doctor is taking him to be operated on, and still with the same mantra of like, everything's gonna be fine, I'm gonna make it better for you, I'm gonna make this easier for you.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna take care of you. And obviously that once you have a full understanding, any of those lines take on such a foreshadowing and such a forewarning feeling to them, but in the moment you still have that feeling, and probably the audience is starting to clue on this isn't such a good guy.
Yeah, definitely. And then that leaves it open to, if the main character is able to escape or something, then the other, like his friends or maybe his sister or someone else that is involved in this is still in custody, and they have to go back and rescue this other person before it's too late.
They have to go rescue the protagonist?
No. So if the protagonist is able to break out and like escape the I need to stop drinking sparkling things. It makes me burp every time. Jesus.
This is just going to be a permanent part of the show.
No, I can't. We can't do the sparkling. What are these called? Spiked sparkling seltzer. God, I still can't get over that time when my dad's girlfriend didn't know that these were spiked with alcohol at my cousin's baby shower. And was literally like, I thought she was just drinking sparkling water the whole night. And I was finally like, oh, is that like a canned wine? And she's like, what?
No.
What? It has alcohol in it?
I would never, the first time that I meet new family members.
Literally my entire family, my entire extended Korean family. Anyway, so if the protagonist and friends and company are the ones who are taken into custody for being disruptive, the protagonist is the one that's first saved by the doctor, and he wheels him out, has a creepy scene, and maybe somehow the protagonist is able to get away or do something to get out of the situation. He still has to make the decision to go back and save his friends or sibling or whomever else is still in custody there, to save them from whatever's happening. And so instead of just like escaping with his life and his sanity and his mind still intact, he has to make the decision to go back and risk it all in order to save someone else.
And that's a great tie-in with sort of that theme of community that we were discussing a little bit last time, is this moment where I love that there can be this whole sequence where, he's tied down and maybe he's just barely trying to get himself undone or whatever it is, and then he finally gets out and he has to escape, and you can have these really quiet moments of him trying to escape and trying to get past people, and these loud moments of them catching him and him having to get through whatever compound or area this is, and him finally getting to a freedom and
it's
having
not really
to
a freedom because he's still in the camp,
right?
So.
Yeah, but getting out of this situation,
Yeah.
and then needing to go back.
I'd almost like to see, I don't know how it would be possible, and this might be the kind of thing that would take a lot more development, but a way for him to get out of it that isn't quite so, normal, the normal escape sequence, because there is that overarching theme of even if he escapes this, he's still stuck there. He can't actually get away. So he has to think of a new way to get out of the situation. He's got to talk his way out of it, or he's got to negotiate his way out of it, or get help from someone else, or do something that saves him from this fate. But because, if he escapes, they're just going to find him, and he knows that. He has to know that. Like, he's got to figure out something else. And I don't know what that would be.
What if... This is a tough one.
Yeah.
What if at the end one of the realizations is, because it's not going to change. I mean, it's the U.S. government controlling its own people, and there's only an amount that you can really shift that.
Yeah.
So what if it's bartering to get rid of the doctor, saying if you don't physically change us, okay, we'll stay here. We'll be peaceful. We'll get through this.
Right.
But stop. But he has to go. Or
So
something.
like bartering with someone else there?
Yeah.
Maybe. Because I was thinking it would be great and climactic if they are able to either, I don't know if kill is the right term, but incapacitate in some way the doctor and get rid of him from the situation. Because then he's out of the picture, thankfully, so the scary experimental procedures are stopping, but then there is still that end scene of them being herded onto the trains to be taken to the actual internment camps, and that's this moment of like, oh, we're going somewhere better, maybe, but you know that they're not. And that kind of dread mixed with hope at the end, because we know what history happens, or what history tells us happened.
So there could be a moment of like, let us go. And then they could be like, yeah, okay, we'll let you go. You're going to go somewhere else, but you don't have to stay here. You can get on, like, we'll take you somewhere else or something.
Who's the they?
I think that there's got to be, as well as the doctor, there has to be some other, like, of the guards.
Well, yeah, no, we talked about that last time, about how there is, like, a trio or something of guards who are particularly brutal and bullying, and so that's who they think the whole time the bad guy is, and they're the red herring. Mm-hmm. So they're still racist assholes, but they're not insidious in the same way that the doctor ends up being.
Now, are these guards, do they have power or authority?
Well, I mean, as much as guards in that situation do, there's always going to be someone higher up.
See, that's why I'm just like, is there somebody higher up who can make these calls, or who they can address the things with to have this change happen?
See, I don't think that they would have access to that person. I don't think the guards would ever let them get to that point. That's why I think...
Not even through a riot?
No. I don't see a riot allowing, and especially in that kind of situation where they are being interned at an assembly center, I don't see that being a situation in which they are granted the ability to talk to people higher up. In that kind of situation, as we've seen a million times throughout history, they're just, by rioting, the guards in charge are just going to push back even harder and allow them even fewer rights. They won't grant them the right to talk to someone in charge. So I'm talking specifically about the moment in which the protagonist is tied to this gurney, being taken by the doctor, and in which he realizes the truth of who the doctor is and what he's been doing. How does he get out of that moment? Like, is there a nurse there who's actually a Japanese internee, and he's able to convince her to like let him go and cover for him with the doctor? Or does he I don't know, have some sort of excuse to get out of it? I don't know what it would be, but like he's able to feign a concussion so badly that the doctor says, well, we'll have to come back to you because his brain is too inflamed and needs rest. Like, does he do something clever to, in that moment, get out of it without sparking alarm?
Right. Okay. I think I always think you were talking about a different point within the film.
Yeah.
I like the idea of there being another character to help him out, but I also don't want that to create that he doesn't have agency or create the change himself. Mm-hmm. So, well, let's think about like, what are the different steps to that to him getting to the procedure? Mm-hmm. Maybe somewhere along the line we could think of what he would be able to use. So it's like, I mean, he's probably being brought in on some form of gurney or type thing where he's strapped in, so he's like doesn't have the ability to move his arms or legs.
Yeah, definitely.
Potentially like fake a seizure or something, or fake going into shock or something. Yeah. And then, but once the doctor leaves, then what does he do?
Well, see, what I'm thinking is he's... Oh, you mean to get out of the situation? Yeah. Oh, okay. Once the doctor has deemed that he...
Yeah, what's that next step?
Right. I don't know. I think my main question was just how does he get the doctor to leave? Mm-hmm. Which would kind of answer that. If he faked a seizure, or if he feigned a really bad concussion, or he convinces someone else to help him or something. For the seizure thing to work, or for the feigning a concussion thing to work, he would have to have had some sort of like foreshadowing of that in the film somewhere, like he was really good at biology or something, you know?
Right.
he wanted to be an EMT or he wanted to do this or that, etc. In order for that to pay off really nicely there. I like the idea of there being like a nurse or a doctor's assistant who is a Japanese American citizen, because there were a lot of their healthcare workers that were actually internees themselves as well. So I think that might be interesting to play with too.
I'm wondering, like, could it be somebody who has had a lobotomy given to him who's assisting and breaks out? I don't know. Just trying to throw things out there.
I think once someone's had a lobotomy, it's pretty hard to bring them back from that.
I think it's impossible.
Yeah.
I think it's a complete change of your identity.
It is. Just kind of scramble your frontal cortex and your sense of self.
Just with an egg beater.
Yeah, basically. A nice pointy rod of an egg beater, yeah.
Such a sad, creepy thing.
Yeah. I think I like the idea that, like, the protagonist, maybe his best friend, are trying to, find out who's taking people or try to rescue someone or try to figure out what's going on, and maybe his kid sister tags along and they all end up getting in trouble, and he didn't intend for his kid sister to be there at all, but they all end up getting detained and like beaten up by the guards and taken into custody. And so then when he finally gets out, in whatever way we ultimately would decide on, and he faces that moment of like, does he leave or not? And maybe he, as he's leaving, peeks through a window and sees his sister being like taken out of her cell by the doctor or something happening like that, where he's like, no, we gotta do something, but he can't do it alone. And that's when he goes and gets like the rest of his like baseball team friends and everything. And then there's like epic ending where they all not necessarily riot, but they go and they do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Basically.
What if his sister has seizures?
Interesting.
So he's sort of the caretaker for her.
Right.
And so that's been established earlier on, as she has a seizure and he's the person taking care of her.
Right.
And like the mean guards could be like, get away from her. And he's like, no, you don't understand. She's having a seizure. I need to take care of her.
Yeah.
And then that sort of sets up, like he's seen it before, and it's also a familial thing.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden, in this moment of high stress, he starts to have a seizure that isn't actually.
Yeah. That makes sense. That could be good. Yeah, and then the doctor, of course, is a doctor and is like, oh, well, like, epilepsy is hereditary and, like, it runs in the family or something. I don't know if that's true at all.
We're not doctors.
Nope.
We are podcast hosts. Thank you very much.
So, yeah, I think that could work really well. And then, of course, at the end, there has to be, like, the next day after all of this has happened and the guards are out there, like, we know you did this, blah, 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 and, like, we're cutting rations, and you have to come forward and tell us who did it, and no one will.
Yeah.
Because it's a community, because they're all standing together, solidarity, etc. And it can either end with that or end with them being herded onto the trains to be taken on.
Yeah, it's such a nice ending when it's all of them standing in solidarity and not turning the kids in.
That can't happen at all. They can't turn the kids in.
No. But then I wonder if the next step becomes necessary seeing them go onto trains.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like it's hard for me to see right now how the two scenes would work together, but I also feel like it wouldn't work as a final act, as a final scene, to just have the next morning when the guards are like, who did it? Turn them in, and nobody says anything. I feel like there needs to be more after that, but I don't see how it necessarily segues into the train thing.
Yeah, creating just that connective tissue or that glue, because both scenes are really strong, but I agree is I have a hard time putting them next to each other. Mm-hmm. And so it's like there needs to be something. I don't know if it's that they think for a moment that things return to a status quo of some kind, and then it just gets uprooted.
Yeah, I don't know. Because I liked the idea originally of the train thing as being this false beacon of hope that they're leaving this place where things have been so terrible, and so if things return to a status quo, then it doesn't. There's no need for that.
Yeah.
The only way that the train thing works, I think, is if the next day, immediately, they're all like pulled out of their beds and everything's raided by the guards, and they think that it's because of what they did, and they think that they're going to get in trouble, and instead they're all told that they're actually going somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so then there's that moment of hope, like, oh, we're not getting in trouble, we're not being punished, we're actually getting to go somewhere better. And then, of course, it's not, but that doesn't need to actually be explicitly said at any point. But in that case, there isn't that opportunity for the community to stand in solidarity with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. It's an either or. I don't know. I think I would need to be writing it in order to figure out which one is more appropriate in the moment.
I think that's kind of it. I really want to, I want to return to this one again, with it to see which one, or like just to see how that can play out. Because I love the moment of all of the community standing in solidarity. But then for it to have that haunting ending of them all on the train is really great too.
Yeah. I think it would just have to be whatever feels right in the moment when it comes to actually putting the script together.
Oh, what a tough place to be at. Two good endings.
Yeah, what can I say?
That can turn into one great ending.
What can I say? But yeah, okay. I think it's a pretty good addendum to tack on, unless you have anything else you want to add about it.
No, I really do want to see this again, though. Yeah. So I hope it goes a little bit further.
We'll see if it gets developed at all anymore.
Mm-hmm.
If I can get through this next couple of hell weeks I have ahead of me.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
You feeling a little like, okay, it's time to trudge on through?
No. I'm so tired.
Oh, no.
I'm so tired.
Well, don't give up the fight, okay?
I'm working on it. I'm trying.
Well, I am Casey.
And I've been Olivia.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening. Make sure you rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. How do you subscribe, Casey?
You go to the show and you click the button that says subscribe.
It's that easy.
Yeah.
Also, make sure you follow us on social media. You can find us on Twitter at JumpscareThePod because it was too long.
And you can go to Instagram and Jumpscare the Podcast because it wasn't long enough.
What? Hey, Casey.
Yeah?
Boo. Ah!